Jabery, Madison, welcome to the ITA College Tennis Coaches Podcast.
Thank you, David. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for asking me.
Yeah, we've I've got to know you a little bit here over the last couple of years, and I've learned a lot more about the Triple C Double A thanks to you, and really enjoyed being out there at the championships in Ohio this year, and just the amount of matches that were being played was very impressive. So I yeah really enjoyed getting to know yourself, a lot of the other coaches, watching the players, learning more about them and their experience as well. So I think a lot of our coaches aren't that familiar, especially at the other divisions. Obviously, junior college, everybody knows what Triple C Double A is. But can you explain a little bit more about the Triple C Double A, kind of what it is, and how competition operates within that structure?
Yeah, sure. And first of all, we really appreciated you being at our state championships in Ohio as well. It meant a lot to the coaches, and that was really a tremendous thing to have you guys there. As far as the 3C2A, so we are, obviously a California Community College Athletic Association, and so all of the members of the 3C2A are California community colleges. Um, I think that we'll go into maybe the differences between the NJC
Hmm.
AA and the 3C2A in a moment, but for us, we have I think somewhere in the range of 110 or so accredited colleges that are part of the 3C2A. We compete in all the sports. Tennis, I believe we have in the women's side 30, I want to say 37, 38 programs. On the men's side, a few less, 33, I believe, as our last at the end of last season. So, we have kind of our own kind of excuse me, the lights. We have our own little kind of um, bubble, if you will, that we kind of compete within. So we don't necessarily compete with the national junior colleges, unless, of course, there are some in Arizona which are, accessible to us pretty easily, especially for the SoCal schools. But for the most part, we just compete within our own bubble there in California. We have two regions, obviously Northern California and Southern California. Within Northern California, depending on the gender, we have we have four, actually in both genders now, we have four conferences. In SoCal, uh, um, we have four. They've been realigned recently, so I believe we have four in SoCal as well. And then the way that our championships work is for the team version, we have a playoff in the North Cal region, and a playoff in the SoCal region, and the champions from each region will play each other for the state championship, and that is in essence our national championship. Have um, we don't have another level that we go to after we win the state title. That's the end of our season. The only time we get to the other national junior colleges on a national level would be at the ITA Cup.
Yeah. And then after the team championships, what I was referencing before for coaches that aren't familiar, then the individual championships take place. And, one of the things that stood out to me, Bo, was, wow, what a great recruiting opportunity for coaches at the other divisions. I mean, some really great tennis being played there. And a lot of coaches just may not. And I know the timing's not great. Coaches might be in coming into their own conference season at that time at the other divisions as you guys are wrapping up your season. But if there is a chance for coaches to get out there, I'd highly recommend that. But so that event hopefully will continue to stay at Ohio going forward. I know you're having some discussions about splitting out individuals and team, kind of what's happening at Division One. But again, all the issues that arise at the other divisions are happening within the Triple C Double A, which, as you said, is California focused. But maybe coaches are slightly more familiar, I don't know, with the NJCAA. And so what are some of the key differences there? Are there any differences in terms of format, rules, scheduling, anything that kind of strikes you as you have played those teams maybe on a spring break or something like that?
Yeah. So of course, my knowledge of the NJCAA is not as probably thorough as it is with a 3C2A, but some of the differences that I am very aware of, and a big one in terms of the types of players that we can recruit, is that we don't have any athletic scholarships.
Right.
Uh, so one thing it's kind of a maybe it really benefits our local kids, but it makes it much harder to recruit the international students. Is that we have what's called a promise grant in California, which enables all California residents to get 2 free years of community college academics before they transfer. So in essence, their first 2 years for every California resident can be free, which is, I mean, for a lot of people, that is a huge benefit, that a much needed benefit for a lot of people. But that doesn't apply for internationals or out of state. And so without the scholarships that the national junior colleges can offer for athletics, it makes the international players coming into California. We just don't get as many there, because if a player is looking for a community college or a junior college in the United States, and they can go to one place and get an athletic scholarship and go to another place and have to pay international tuition, which they do in California, then there has to be a specific reason why they would come to us. Maybe they have family in the area. Maybe obviously California is a very nice place to be. So if you wanted to be in one of the more desirable areas, of course, or maybe a coach they really get along with, or something there'd have to be some sort of incentive to pay that extra amount. So that's a big difference between us and the national junior colleges, and it obviously has some impact on the level of play. Because a lot of players with their level, their junior accolades, their rating, they can get scholarships at other national junior colleges, which we can't do. It doesn't matter. We just can't do that here. Other than the Promise Grant, which is only for California residents. So that would be the major difference that I can think of. Then there's some benefits in the sense that we're kind of a lot more densely packed. Like just in one state, we have 38 women's teams and 33 men. So that we have so many teams in a generally small, a relatively small area. And so that's nice in terms of travel. We get to play our whole state championships. Obviously, we really don't, we can drive everywhere pretty much. For us, trips we go is a 5-6 hour drive. So we can get all our matches, all our season in with relatively, compared to, I'm sure, national junior colleges or other levels where they are having to travel across the country. We just are basically within an hour or so in our conference, and then really, like I said, in our entire state championships, we never have to travel outside of driving range. So I think that's kind of nice, and probably, and I would imagine a big difference. Those are the major differences that I can think of really affect our level of play compared to the national.
And so, Bo, you're also a professor at American River. I want to explore that a little bit more, but is that the case for most of the coaches in the CCCAA, or are you kind of an outlier?
At this point, unfortunately, I'm kind of an outlier. So I got hired full-time in 2010. I had 5 years before that as coach, but as an adjunct, as a part-time faculty member. And since I was hired in 2010, I think that we've had, if my memory serves me here, I think we've had 3 coaches hired as full-time instructors or as full-time faculty, and we're probably down, if I had to estimate, somewhere between 25% to maybe a third of the coaches are full-time, I'd say, in the state, somewhere between in that range, 25, maybe 30%, somewhere in there. And it didn't used to be that way. Like when I was a player, looking back on it in the 90s, I would, based on my recollection and what I know of the coaches that have retired since and so forth, it was probably a vast majority were full-time. And it just to kind of clarify, a full-time faculty member, in other words, having the coaching position, also includes a teaching position in California. So I'm not sure if that's the way it works in throughout the country, but for California colleges, if you're a full-time faculty member, you're also, part of your load is also teaching. And so that's how all the jobs are structured. And so we're really on the same scale as any other instructor at the college. It doesn't matter what department, we're all kind of part of the same, we're all in the same kind of we're all tenure track or tenured faculty member, same way. So the way my job is structured is really, I'm an instructor. As we all know, probably a large majority of my time goes towards the coaching, but really I'm considered an instructor. And like I said, unfortunately, it's not it's not the norm now for the coaches to be in that position. Most of them are going to be adjunct faculty, which, as you can imagine, makes it very hard to have continuity. So a lot of our programs that used to have very well that had a lot of history and culture and a lot of tradition associated with what they with their programs. It's hard to continue that when you have these when you have part-time coaches who are going to be in and out much more quickly than a full-time instructor would, or a full-time faculty member would. So it creates those problems. It also makes it hard for programs. Some programs who are struggling with numbers, and then you have different coaches every couple of years, and that you don't get to build on that momentum of recruiting, or it makes it tough. It makes it tough to really have the kind of association that we want to have when so many are part-time. And so I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. I hope it does, but that hasn't been the trend.
And so the other 70, 75% or so coaches that maybe are not on that track, would they be local coaches, maybe in clubs, country clubs, and are doing this as kind of as a passion project almost? I mean, what maybe are the other coaches doing to make it worth their time and possible?
Certainly, that is going to be the majority of those coaches are going to be coaches that are working other jobs.
Mm-hmm.
To make their necessary income. So I would say probably a majority of them are teaching pros at a club, or in some cases they have access to the courts to run their own academies, or their own or teach their own private lessons. So in some ways that can be that can be a beneficial part of the job, is that you have access to the facilities if that's the way the college chooses to work it. There's been maybe a recent surge of at least a few coaches I can think of that are retired, that have come back as something to do in retirement. Maybe they retired early. A couple that come to mind are law enforcement that retired in their early 50s, and they're still relatively young, have a lot of energy, love the game, and they want to give back to their community. A lot of them, obviously, were former tennis players, or even current coaches. Maybe teaching part-time at a club or something. And those coaches seem, because they're not spread as thin as the younger coaches who are still, having to provide maybe for a family or whatever else. Those coaches can put more. It seems to me that they can put more. They've been putting more time and effort into it because they don't have the same responsibilities maybe as they did when they were working full time as in another job. So I can think of a few of those. So I'd say the vast majority of them are people that are maybe working a teaching job, maybe a retail job, and then this is part of their jobs or whatever it might be, which makes to recruit successfully, to spend the time and effort, at the practices, to in the off season, give the time that you need to prepare the team properly for the season. So it's a really tough challenge. I did it for 5 years as part time, and obviously had jobs, and it's not easy. Back when I was doing it, it was kind of a means to an end. You put your time in, you do a good job, you prove that you're competent and that you can do the job well. And then when the time comes for the job to open up full time, then you have your foot in the door. Mm-hmm. Even though some colleges may be saying that, I don't think that is a very common situation now.
Okay. And when you got started, Bo, were you thinking that you were going to go down the college coaching road and maybe look at some other divisions, or were you thinking, no, this is the ideal setup, I want to have a full-time tenured position at a community college, and where you've landed, obviously, but was that kind of the plan going in, or did you have a plan?
I did not have a plan. I was actually, so I played at American River myself.
Mm-hmm.
It did exactly for me what I want to do for the players coming through our program, and that is, it opened up doors for me. It opened up opportunities that weren't available for me coming out of high school, academically or athletically. I wasn't really ready for the places I want to go. I just wasn't ready, academically and athletically. I hadn't earned that right. And so American River was a place that I went to continue to grow. It gave me a second chance in my academic career to really make it a priority and do well there. And then obviously in terms of the tennis, I improved to the point where I could go and play at the 4-year school that I had dreamed of. After I got done playing at the 4-year level, which I played at UC Davis, then I came back as an assistant just as something to do. My former coach at American River was still the head coach at American River, and he invited me to come out and be a volunteer assistant coach while I was going to work on my master's degree and so forth. I had some things come up in my personal life, some unfortunate things that so I had to take care of those things. Some really tragic things for my family that I had to just take care of, and being the assistant at that time really gave me a way to get away from those responsibilities and be able to, kind of be active and with these young motivated athletes. It really helped me get my mind off some of those harder things that I had to deal with immediately after 4-year college. So it was nice to have that, but I had no intention to be a coach. I had no desire to be the head coach. It's just so happened that after my 3rd year as assistant, and I was going to move on, and I had been accepted to a master's program at Sac State. It just so happened that the coach stepped down, and the athletic director asked me to apply for it. And I thought more than anything, it'd be a good experience to, put together a professional resume and go through the interview process and do all the things that I thought eventually one day I would have to do. And I didn't really think I had much of a chance to get the job. There were some pretty well qualified people applying for it. But it turned out I got it. And then once I got it, I was kind of like, oh boy, what do I do now? I'm kind of in the deep water, and better learn how to swim here. So it turned out that it worked out well. As far as a career, I think once I realized what the full-time position really entailed, the satisfaction you can get from helping these young athletes, the degree to which I do enjoy teaching, then obviously the tenured position, along with the benefits, it's a good salary. It's all the things that I was really looking for. I realized this would be a dream job as a full-time position. So I worked hard on my master's, got that, and was able to, get the full-time up after 5 years of, grinding pretty hard, work on the graduate degree, and then also having to work, and worked at a retail shop, taught lessons on the side, and, made ends meet. And then when the job opened up, I was fortunate enough to get it.
Yeah, very good. Well, they made a good decision, and you've gone on to great success through the years. But yeah, going back to kind of, well, those early days, but even the current days, just time management, right? That's something that we all struggle in every industry. But I think coaches, again, triple C, double A coaches are not alone. I mean, my first year, I was Division I coach. I was making $10,000. I had to fight and scrap for to make ends meet. And so it's happening at every level. But how do you parse out your year and your responsibilities, as a father, as a husband, the professorship roles, managing those students? I know that's getting more challenging. The expectations and demands get higher from students, maybe even their parents these days now as well. But then also what you're trying to do with the team. I mean, and all your volunteering, and we'll get into that later as well. I mean, you volunteer a lot of your time to help the ITA, to help the triple C, double A. How do you think about time management? Do you have any systems, anything that you've learned through the years that you've applied that you found helpful?
Yeah, certainly. And of course, doing it for 20 years, every year you learn something, right? Or you add something to your to-do list. I have a year-long to-do list broken up each month. And, maybe started off with 2 or 3 things to do each month. And now some months have 15 or 20 things to do, right? So I on the first of every month, I look at that to-do list and write those things out for the rest of the month, in my calendar, my planner, because without that, I would be, I'm sure I'd be missing a lot of deadlines and missing a lot of, responsibilities that are very important. So certainly that's my system, is I just keep a document, on my Google Docs, and every first of every month I look at it, and it's always being adjusted. I just added a couple things in last week that that are things that I hadn't thought of before, or things that needed to be put on that list that weren't. So that's how I kind of make sure I don't miss things. As far as the responsibilities being spread between being, father, a teacher, and a coach, I think just like, and I know you've been in those shoes, and I think a lot of the coaches are, at being spread thin, and that's just something that you have to prioritize in your life. Obviously, I love my job and I love my athletes. I love my students, and family comes first, and so after that, after I make sure that those responsibilities are done, then I put all the time and effort that I can into the job part. And uh, so far we've been able to balance it, but there are times where you feel spread very thin,
I'm
and
sure. Yeah.
just by, as there are things you miss being away from the kids for a week, and you have a 6 and a 2-year-old, you miss things, and it's a little bit sad. And you're doing my 2-year-old is doing new things all the time, and you're in Ojai for a week, and you miss some. So as with any coach, anyone who travels for their job, that's part of the deal.
Yeah. And with the recruiting side of things, because yeah, you've got your classes, you've got your practices, you've got your matches scheduled out, but recruiting can be a lot less structured. So when you have all these other things going on, sometimes, you have to drop everything to take a call, or, go see somebody play, or visit with a coach, or visit with a family, etc. Um, you know, you're maybe not going as far afield as we talked about the scholarship situation. So you're recruiting a lot within Northern California. But do you have, you don't need to name them, but you have, specific events that you're going to every year, and they're kind of built into your to-do calendar list, or does it depend a lot on what your needs are from one year to the next?
Oh, it's a good question. I have a kind of like with my calendar, I have a checklist. I'm big on to-do lists, right? Checklists, because I feel like I need that to not forget things. But
Hmm.
same thing with recruiting. I have dates that I check with certain local programs, the local junior programs. We have some academies in town that I want to make sure that I'm not overlooking anybody or missing out on anybody who American River is a good fit for them. And again, we have a very specific type of student athlete that American River is a good fit for. There's a lot of factors that go into that, whether or not AR is a good fit. But I want to make sure that I talk to the coaches in those academies and or those junior programs. So that's on my checklist of things to do, and that's just usually a call or a stop by. If there's a few of them that are very close, so I might stop by and actually meet with that coach, and most of those are my friends and colleagues. So usually that's a pretty easy thing to do. The other thing that I do is I make myself familiar with the local high school teams, at least with their results. So I'll follow the local high school team. So you never know with the high schools. A lot of times you'll get some diamonds in the rough that that don't play a lot of juniors. Maybe they don't have the the financial means to do that, or maybe they're a 3-sport athlete, or maybe they're you never know. And a lot of times at our level, we'll find kids that maybe don't have the most tennis experience, but are very athletic, or are have picked up the game a little bit later in life, and they have a strong passion for it. And it's amazing what those kind of student athletes at that age can do, and how much they can improve. So I try to make myself familiar with that in the recruiting process, our local high school teams. And then, yeah, I'm making I'll try to have a presence at the ITA events. Just was at the Davis event, had obviously a lot of my players playing, but also a lot of juniors, up and coming juniors playing. So I like to make myself familiar with those student athletes, or with those upcoming athletes, in case they are interested. We have some other open events that I'm going to go to this weekend. We have one at the club near my house, so I'm going to go out there. So it's just basically that. I feel so. Yeah, I feel very fortunate in terms of um, just not having to. The recruiting is another monster at the 4-year level, and I know that by talking with the local 4-year coaches and how much time they have to spend doing that, how much traveling they have to do. It's a huge time and effort on their part. So I don't have that same really requirement.
Hmm.
We get a lot. It's gotten a lot of the local players, if they know, if they're serious about improving and transferring, a lot of them know that we're a good option for them already. And so we get contacted by a lot of the players that we get. I'd say probably over half of them contact me before I ever contact them.
Hmm.
they know if it's a good fit. They know about our program. I think that our reputation is pretty well known in the area, and so a lot of our players are just players that have come to me, and we'll discuss whether or not it's a good fit, and if it is, then they join, and if it's not, then there's other places they can go as well. But I'm very fortunate that I don't have to spend the same amount of time and effort as a lot of four-year schools to recruit and to have the kind of players that we want to have.
Mm.
And almost I would say on a year-to-year basis, probably 80 to 90% of our athletes are from Northern California. Like I said earlier, we don't get a lot of internationals for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Also, our district, even within the state of California, there are districts that are much more, I don't know, international friendly, I guess. Lower TOEFL scores, lower international tuition rates.
Mm-hmm.
So really, unless you're looking for something that we have, and I think we do have some, pretty cool things about our program, but there's other places that internationals can go in California even that are easier for them than us. So we don't get a lot of internationals. We don't get a lot of out of state. Most of our guys are NorCal guys that kind of know about our program because they're from the area.
Yeah.
So that way, in terms of recruiting, it really helps so that there's not as much of a burden on me.
Yeah. So then, Bo, when these players come, they arrive on campus, and even prior to them arriving on campus, it's a different mindset that I'm not familiar with because you've got 2 years with these players, maybe in some cases 1 year. And so when they've told you, hey, my goal is to play at a 4-year school, I want to get as good as I can here over the next couple of years, and then go to school X, Y, and Z, and play on those tennis teams there. How do you think about their development? Is it, just trying to give them as many match play opportunities as possible? Are you, having those hard conversations with them like, hey, if you want to play at this level, you better fix your serve because it sucks, or whatever those conversations might be that you're having. So yeah, how do you think about that in such a shortened time period? Because I felt like as a coach, I often didn't see kind of the fruits of my labor till maybe their junior year, both from kind of a tennis development and just kind of personal development. So you're having to speed that up at a much faster rate. So anything you can share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be a hard thing, right? Because you see these players come in, you see them grow, you see them on their way to great things, and then they're doing those great things somewhere else. And what we do. And I think it's really important for me, and I take the time out. I'd say weekly. I have to remind myself of this. It's not about me. It's not about American River College tennis winning necessarily, or being, it's not about ego. What this has to be about is creating opportunities, opening doors for the student athletes that come through our program. That's what it has to be about. And if you
Mm.
keep that, and you remember that's what we're all about, and that's what we're here for, not to serve my ego, or I'm a competitive person, I want to win, but it's not about that. Those things are fun and those things are great, and we obviously it's a lot of fun to do that, but that's not what it's about. What we're about is players coming to our program. We are a stepping stone, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with your program, with your heart and soul being put into something that is not the end destination for these athletes. They are for the ones that want to move on, at least, and play, which I'd say probably around 30 to 40% of ours do. You have to be okay with that, and when you're okay with that, when you come to peace with that, then I think that makes their time here a lot more productive, because then you're running practices, playing matches. We play a lot of four-year schools because even though we don't beat the D1s, but it's just a tremendous experience for our guys to be out there. Even though it goes a loss in our win column or in our win-loss record, that's okay. This is something that's going to make our student athletes better. It's going to get them exposure. It's going to give them match play against the level that they're looking to transfer to. You have to be okay with those things, and once you become okay with it, then the 2-year situation becomes more manageable, and I think you can get more out of it. That doesn't mean that I'm not sad when a lot of these guys go on. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I see the end product of what they become, in terms of players and student athletes. But understanding your role and understanding what we do and understanding what we're here for at the end of the day, I think is very important. Yes, only having them here for 2 years also changes the way you coach them. You can't take in somebody and completely revamp their game. You can't rebuild their game. You can't change maybe you could, but if there's real problems, you can change strokes, you can change grips or stuff like that. But that's a process that probably is going to take longer than their 2 years here. Where I think at a 4-year school, a coach could probably start with someone as a freshman, and by a senior, they could be a completely different player. I
Mhm.
don't think here in that 2-year window we can really do that. So what I've kind of made an effort to do is make myself the best coach as I can at taking the tools a player has and teaching them how to implement them in match play to be able to maximize their strengths that they do have. Of course, we're working on things, technique to some degree, certainly in terms of how to construct points and who they and their identity as a player. Those are all things that, of course, we're doing. But changing a player's game, I think, in 2 years is a lot to ask for most players. So I've kind of but at the same time, I don't think very many of the players that we take in are maximizing their ability as it is. So if we take what they have and teach them how to maximize that, they can increase in level just based on the understanding of who they are as a player and how to use those tools.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. So as we talked about entering your 20th season now, what are some of the lessons you've learned over the years, that maybe the harder lessons, like the mistakes that you've made, that you recognize you're not making any longer and you're a better coach because of it?
Yeah, still making mistakes, unfortunately. But yeah, I would say the biggest ones that come to mind would be, I think, when you start coaching as a 25-year-old who's still competing, and who's just a few years off their college career and still has this mindset of a competitor, as
Hmm.
a what I am now, which is somebody who still does compete, but in a much different way. Um, you look at yourself more as somebody who's trying to help these student athletes as opposed to somebody who's trying to win with these student athletes, if that makes sense. And because
Yeah.
when I was 25, I don't think I had that bigger picture perspective. I also think that as a player or as just a young man in general, um, I think that I coach too much with emotion, and I coach too much with trying to force people to do things um, as opposed to being a more rational and logical coach who tried to keep their emotions out of it. That's not to say that my emotions don't get involved, because sometimes they do, and usually to my detriment. But the more I can coach from a logical and kind of rational perspective, or from that mindset, usually the better decisions I make, and usually the better that message gets across. That's one thing I've learned. And then the other thing was, just having that perspective of the big picture and what we're really trying to do. The things I told you about our program, a few minutes ago in terms of what our purpose is, I don't think I would have stated those as our purpose 20 years ago. I think I would have stated, we're here to win conference titles. We're here to win regional titles. We're here to win state titles. We're here to, win championships, and to get players onto the next level. That's probably what I would have said. Whereas now, there's so many more important things than that, specifically personal growth and teaching them life skills that are going to help them in life, whether or not they play at 4-year level. So those are the two main things I think that have changed over time, and I'm still learning every year. I'm still making plenty of mistakes, and hopefully learning from them. So maybe in
Mhm.
another, I'll be looking back at this interview and being like, what was I thinking? What are you talking about? But who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. And Bo, have you seen any differences in the makeup of the players that now are coming through the community college system versus maybe when you even played in the 90s? I mean, you said, hey, I wasn't really ready academically. I wasn't ready, from a tennis development standpoint. I need those couple of years to develop. Is that still kind of the case today, or, does maybe the financials play a much bigger role because college just got so expensive now? Even I know for the California systems, the UC schools, I mean, they used to accept pretty much anybody who would apply, back in the day, 30, 40 years ago. And now it's almost impossible to get into those schools. Like, so has that kind of shifted through the years, or is it still a combination of things, maybe?
I would say that some of the issues that we deal with young people at the age of 18, 19, 20 are going to be the same as that time period. Time management, discipline, understanding responsibility, accountability. These are all things that I think are common themes of things that young people need to learn how to do. So I think those things remain the same as they were 20 years ago. 30 years ago, when I was playing, and 20 years ago when I took the job. Um, I think, but the details of it have changed. Obviously, social media is a big part of everything we do now, and I think there's definitely benefits to it, and there's, I think, definitely drawbacks to it. And I think, um, and these are generalities that I'm going to be speaking in here, but I think that the communication, especially interpersonal communication, when we're not talking on text, but when we're talking maybe on the phone or in person, um, I don't feel it's as easy as it was 20 years ago. And maybe that might have something to do with me being closer to their age 20 years ago. But it might also have something to do with the way that young people communicate now. And I think that's one thing that has definitely changed. I think some more things that have changed. The game has changed. When we were playing, in the 90s, it was how can you construct a point so that you can end up in an advantageous court position and finish the point off at the net, right? That was generally how most players were, whether they were falling or whether they were staying back, but still looking for opportunities to hit approach down the line, come in and knock the volley off. I mean, these were all things that that we were doing. And even when I started coaching in the early 2000s, but the way that technology has changed, the way the game has changed, the skill sets have changed. Most of the guys that come in now on our team aren't very comfortable with the net. They don't volley well. Doubles is a learning process every year for us. And these are all things that I think from the technical and strategic side of the game, those have changed. So we get players who are, I think, in my opinion, far more athletic off the baseline, better movers. Obviously, they can do things with the ball in terms of shape and creating heaviness and from positions that I could never, with the equipment we had, I can never, on the dead run off balance on my back foot, hit a short angle, heavy rotating ball that, it's like that wasn't a shot for me, but it is a shot for a lot of these guys because of probably some of the athleticism that they've developed with better training methods and stuff. But so that part of the game has changed. And then, like I said, some of the challenges are the same, and some of them are different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting times. Don't get me started on social media, but getting into the
I don't do it.
yeah, you're wise. With the just the triple C double A again, so you've been in the role of tennis president. So every sport I understand has a president represented by a coach. And there's a lot of work that you do in that regard. You've also served on the ITA operating committee for junior college. Yeah, I guess my question is why? Like, why has this been important to you to serve your sport in this way?
I think a big part of it is what we talked about earlier. I'm one of the lucky few who am fortunate enough to have this position in a full-time capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Work another job. I don't have to grind and go to different sites and do different things. So everything I do is at American River, which means I save so much time and it makes my life much simpler. So I feel like it's kind of my responsibility as a full-time faculty, as one of the few. Like I said, maybe a quarter to a third of the coaches are full-time at this point, and I'm one of the younger ones, who's not at the end of my career, which I think most of the full-timers are getting close to that at least. So I feel like, given that I have the energy, I have the time, and I'm fortunate enough to have the position where I have that luxury, I think that I need to take on those roles, as opposed to somebody who's more a crunch for time doing those things. I don't want 3C2A tennis to die. I don't want us to be neglected. I don't want us to be alienated. I want us to be included, whether it's 3C2A, whether it's the ITA. I want us to have a voice there, and I want us to have a presence there. And so to be a part of those, I feel like it's part of my responsibility. So I just stepped down from the presidency. I'd done it for 6 years, and before that, the 2 year gap, I think I had done it 6 years before. So 12 out of the last 14 years, I've been the president, which, like you said, is a lot of time. It's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And but I think there's someone has to do it, and someone hopefully that cares is doing it, so that they're putting in the necessary effort. So that's kind of why I chose to do those things. Also things like ranking committees that I'm on also, and I want to make sure things get done right. I don't want it to get done I don't want it to get done halfway with a halfway job. I want it to be done right. So if you have to be part of that, don't complain about it and not be a part of the process. Get yourself as part of the process so that it can be done right, at least in your estimation. So that's I guess that's the reason I get involved in those areas.
Okay, well, thank you for doing that, Bo. It means a lot to us at the ITA who we rely so heavily on our coaches at all divisions to be involved. But I think as we talk about changing generations as well, that's getting harder as well. It's harder to identify coaches that recognize the importance of that, and we're trying to really preach that to our younger coaches. So any of our younger coaches who are listening, just recognize there's a generation of coaches ahead of you who have put in a huge amount of time, not paid for it, probably catch a lot of abuse for certain decisions that are made, which that's not what they signed up for. But I think if we all take turns and we all give a few years here and there, we can keep things going in a positive direction. But we're going to get into some rapid fire questions now. What is your favorite drill to do with your team?
We have one called cardio doubles. I know there's a lot of variations of this, but I like ours because it is fast paced. Heart rates are up, energy is up, adrenaline's up, and there's a lot of like quick reaction type situations that are a lot of fun, and the guys just love it. So I would go with that one, cardio dubs.
Okay. Is there a helpful book to your coaching career that you often cite or go back to upon occasion?
Wooden
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
by
He
John.
he knew a thing or two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, most useful piece of advice you've ever received in any part of your life, not just coaching.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought of it from a coaching perspective. So I have actually two. One before when I took the job, there's a local kind of I don't know a local legend really. I mean he's a his name is Bob Reynolds and he's helped so many people from my generation. Fall in love with the game, helped us with our games, went out of his way to get us out on the court when we were younger, taught us how to play doubles. And when I took the job, he gave me a piece of advice which at the time I didn't really maybe I didn't maybe value it as much as I did later on. And what he told me was he said he had coached at the community college level for 1 year previously at Sacramento City College. And what he told me was he said, and again I'm paraphrasing, is not going to be exact, but he said something to the degree of he knew me, he knew my personality, he knew my attitude, and he said, not every athlete on your team is going to care about their own success as much as you care about their success.
Hmm.
And what I think he was doing was preparing me for that scenario, which he knew would inevitably come up. And what it did for me was it put me in a situation where I wasn't living and dying with every student athlete. There's going to be situations that maybe don't work out perfectly, that you don't see the growth that you were hoping for, that you don't have the connection that you wanted with that athlete, that you don't see the motivation in them for their own success as you feel for them, that you want for them. And I think if I didn't have that, it would have been a little bit demoralizing, and I could have beat myself up for it, and I think that I would have blamed myself a little bit more than I did. But when he told me that, and then I experienced it, I didn't live and die with it. And so in other words, I was available for the next student athlete. I wasn't I might have checked out if I had enough of those situations because maybe I would have been dejected over those. But
Yeah.
I was okay with it. Obviously, do everything you can to get every person that goes through our program. We want to give them the best experience possible. But if it doesn't work out, and for whatever reason you don't have that connection, then if you don't die with that failure, if you will, then you're available for the next player, for the next student athlete, and then you're going to have, of course, your fair share of successes and your fair share of non-successes. But I thought
Mhm.
that fair for that, and so I was thankful to Bob Reynolds for that. Another piece of advice that was given to me by the assistant athletic director, and he knew me because I'd been assistant coach for the tennis team for a few years, and he pulled me aside. He said two things that really meant a lot to me. He said, number one, I believe in you. I believe you're going to do a great job here. And he said, and number two, he said, don't worry about the results, the wins and losses in your first few years. Instead, prioritize building a culture and build an environment. And over time, if you build the culture and environment that that you want to, then the players that you want will come. But if you sacrifice your beliefs, or if you sacrifice your philosophies to win some more matches early on, and I think as tennis coaches we can imagine what those might be. You know, turning a blind eye to a bad call, or a code violation, or taking a player on your team who's bad for team chemistry because he's your number one player, whatever those situations might be, and we've all run across those. But he encouraged me to not be overly focused on the wins and losses early on, and to build a culture. That's your first priority, because if you do that, then that will be in place for as long as you're here, and you will then attract the type of players that your culture is attractive to, right? And so that's what I believe has happened. And we certainly didn't win very much in those first few years. I was lucky to have a few really good players drop in my lap, but really that were great kids as well. But for the most part, I think that time was spent building the kind of program that we wanted, in terms of character, in terms of work ethic and discipline and those kind of things, which I think now has led to kind of the recruiting that I told you earlier, is mostly kids coming to over 50%. So those would be 2 points of advice of coaching that I feel were very impactful early on in my career, and that helped me succeed early on, which otherwise I might have been burned out and quit and been gone long ago.
Oh, that's excellent. And what is one thing you wish more people, whether it's the coaches, tennis community, knew about 3C2A tennis?
Man, and there's a couple. The first one is, I just wish that I wish that people, specifically maybe even the administrators in the 3C2A, I really wish that they knew how many people 3C2A tennis has positively impacted on their lives, and how many people have continued playing this wonderful sport and made it a lifelong activity that they could enjoy because of the community college level. Almost all of our players, I mean, most of the players that play California community college tennis, I would say probably 75 to 80% of them, if I had to guess. That's just a pure guess from me. But I would say either way, a vast majority of them would not have continued playing at the college level. In other words, at a four-year school, if there was no college in California. But what so many of those people that come through our level of play experience is, they fall in love with the game, probably even more so than they did in high school or playing juniors, because as we all know, that college tennis team dynamic creates a whole new experience that we don't get when we're individuals, you know, playing at a tournament, just representing ourselves. We get a completely different feeling from playing on a team. And that translates to, if I were to go through the USTA, I know the most about the 5-0 leagues and the 4-5 leagues, right? If I was to go through those and look at how many people played California community college tennis, it's going to be over 50%. And I would wager that most of those people would have stopped playing if it wasn't for that, having this level of tennis. If it did, those people would not be playing, and they would have stopped playing, and they would have found other hobbies or habits or whatever else. And it probably those things probably wouldn't have been as good for them physically or socially as tennis is, because as we know, in those two areas, tennis is as good as any sport that there is, and you can do it as long as any, along with golf. So, but with tennis, you get the cardiovascular and physical attribute benefits as well. So, I just wish that people knew how much of an impact this level of tennis has had on people over the years. And when we lose teams, we lose programs. And, you know, God forbid we lose the sport. Who knows which direction college athletics in general are going, and tennis. It would so many people would be losing wonderful opportunities and life-changing experiences with.
Yeah, no, it's a powerful statement. Thanks for sharing that. And Bo, what is one lesson you hope your players have learned from you by the time they graduate?
That's a great question. We want to, yeah, like I said earlier, we want to impart them with life skills. I want them to be good tennis players, and I want them to, be able to fulfill their dreams on the tennis court. But more importantly, I want them to have skills that are going to serve them in life, and their jobs, and their marriages, and their social lives, and all the different things they're going to do in their lives that are going to be. At the end of the day, we all love tennis, and we all feel like it's the entire world for us. But as we know, as we get on in life and we move through college and into the real world, there's so many other things that are going to be more important than who wins or loses a tennis match. So I would say those life skills, and probably the biggest one of those would be the ability to deal with adversity, the ability to take things that don't go your way and make the best out of them, and make the best out of every situation. So not just adversity, but whether something great has happened to you, whether something neutral has happened to you, whether something terrible has happened to you, whatever situation you're in, make the best out of it. Obviously, the tough situations are the hardest for a lot of us, but if you face that tough situation, you have an emotional breakdown and you can't control your emotions, and you're the metaphor, of course, on the tennis court would be you're smashing your racket or slamming balls over the place. Well, the way that translates into the real world is going to cost you a lot, and so I hope that the players going through the program understand, first of all, why we have I guess the rules that we have in terms of holding yourself accountable for the way you carry yourself, and that after they leave here, they implement those skills into their real lives, because I think that's more impactful in the long run than any tennis match that you're going to win or lose.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bo, thank you for today. I know our coaches learned a lot more about 3C2A tennis that they probably or may not have known about before, and I hope they'll pay close attention and recognize the great players that are playing there, and great coaches like yourself that are working with these players. They're going to be well positioned to take advantage of that 4-year opportunity when they get there. So keep doing what you're doing. Best of luck in your 20th season. I hope it's the best of all of them. And thanks for all your service to college tennis as well.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, David. I really enjoyed it. Enjoyed all our talks, and congratulations to yourself on, the new position with the ITA. And I couldn't be happier for you. And I think that the ITA is in very, very good hands with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.